Imagine dying completely, feeling your body go paralyzed, your heart stop, your breath cease, and being fully conscious during all of it. Ramana Maharshi was 16 years old when this happened. He wasn't sick, he wasn't in danger, but suddenly, without warning, an absolute fear of death overwhelmed him. And instead of running away, he decided to die. And in that conscious death, he discovered something that would change not only his life, but the understanding of thousands of people about who we truly are. Because Ramana died. But something continued to live. Something that was never born. Something that can never die. It was 1896 in Madurai, southern India. An ordinary teenager, an average student, with no particular interest in spirituality. And then, alone in his room, something happened. An overwhelming terror of death surged from nowhere. Not a thought about death, a visceral certainty that he was dying now. And what would most people do? They would panic. They would call for help. They would try to escape the terror. But Ramana did the opposite. He lay down on the ground. He stretched his body out like a corpse. And he decided, I'm going to find out what death is, now. He pretended to be dead. He stopped breathing. He let his body become rigid. And he watched. The body is dead, but who is watching? Who is aware that the body has died? And in that moment, in that eternal second, something exploded. The identity of Ramana, the 16-year-old boy, died. And what remained was pure consciousness. Formless, nameless, historyless. Just absolute presence witnessing everything. He never breathed like the same person again, because that person had truly died. Do you understand what happened? Ramana didn't have a beautiful spiritual experience. He didn't see lights, he didn't hear celestial voices, he didn't feel mystical ecstasy. He experienced death, the death of the ego, the death of identity, the death of everything he thought he was. And what remained was being, the real I. That which exists before any thought, before any name, before any story. Nisargadatta had his master. Others had years of practice. But Ramana experienced spontaneous ego death at age 16. And he never returned. He left that room, silent. Literally, not because he couldn't speak, but because there was no one left to speak to. There was no more, I need, I want, I am. There was only being. His family didn't understand. What happened to you? Why are you acting so strange? But he couldn't explain. How do you explain that you died? How do you say, I no longer exist, but I'm more alive than ever? So he simply left. He left everything behind. Family, studies, identity. And he went to Arunachala, the sacred mountain he felt calling to him. Not because he was religious, but because something beyond his mind knew. That's where this body-mind needs to be. And he stayed there for the next 54 years, until he died, this time, his real body. But for Ramana, it made no difference, because he had already died 54 years before. Here is the truth that Ramana discovered, and it will destroy everything you have built around yourself. You cannot die, because you were never born. What you think you is, the name, the story, the persona, that's what dies. But the real you is eternal. Ramana didn't become enlightened. He realized he always had been, that he had always been awake, that the only thing that happened was the end of the illusion that he was someone. And that's terrifying, because it means that everything you stand for, your personality, your achievements, your traumas, your history, all of that is temporary. All of that will die. In fact, all of that is already dying every second. You just pretend it isn't. But what is reading these words now? What is conscious of this moment? This does not die. Because this is not yours. It is what you are. Ramana spent the rest of his life pointing this out, not teaching, not giving techniques, just pointing. Look inside. Who is looking? Who is conscious? Find that. And you have found everything. And people came by the thousands. And he hardly spoke, because how do you teach someone to be what they already are? You don't teach. You just point, and expect them to stop searching and simply see. There's something profoundly terrifying and liberating about it. Ramana, at age 16, discovered that he didn't exist. And instead of collapsing, he became more real than anyone you've ever met. Because here's the paradox. When the false self dies, the true self finally lives. Are you afraid of death? We all are. But it's not the death of the body that scares you. It's the death of who you think you are. It's the death of your story, of your identity, of your carefully constructed persona. But what if that death were the greatest gift? What if dying psychologically while still alive were the only path to true freedom? Take a deep breath. Feel this body now. Feel this breath. And ask, who is feeling? Who is aware? Does this aware person need a name, need a story, need an identity, or is he simply... In the next chapter, we will explore the question Ramana asked his entire life. The question that is so simple it seems silly, and so profound that it destroys any answer you try to give. Who am I? Prepare yourself. Because this question is not philosophical. It's a bomb. Death is not extinguishing the light. It is putting out the lamp because dawn has broken. Rabindranath Tagore on Ramana's death. Who am I? It seems simple, it even seems naive. You think you know the answer. I am my name, I am my profession, I am my story. But Ramana Maharshi took that question, the simplest of all, and turned it into a nuclear bomb. Because when you truly ask, who am I, and don't accept any superficial answers, everything crumbles, every identity, every persona, every illusion, and what's left? That's what we're going to find out now. But I'm warning you, you're not going to like the answer. Or rather, your ego won't. People came to Ramana with complex problems. How do I get rid of my anger? How do I overcome my past? How do I find peace? And he always answered the same thing. Who is angry? Who has a past? Who seeks peace? And people would get frustrated. Me, I'm angry. I need peace. And Ramana, with those penetrating eyes, show me that self. Where is it? And the person would freeze. Because suddenly I realized, I can't point to myself. I can't show it. I can't find it anywhere. Is it on my mind? But thoughts change every second. If you were your thoughts, you would change completely all the time. Is it in my body? But the body's cells are constantly renewing themselves. In 7 years, you won't have a single cell that you had before. So who are you? Is it in my memories? But memories are just thoughts about the past. And thoughts are not you. You observe them, and suddenly, the person saw. There was no I anywhere. There was only the search for I. And when the search stopped, something extraordinary happened. Ramana called this Atma Vichara, self-inquiry. But it wasn't a meditative technique. It wasn't an intellectual exercise. It was a surgical scalpel cutting straight to the root of illusion. The question, who am I, doesn't seek an answer. It seeks the questioner. And when you turn your attention to the one asking, something collapses. Carl Jung said that the ego is necessary to function in the world, and Ramana would agree. But he would add, just don't confuse the tool with who you are. The ego is like clothing, useful, but you are not the clothing. Most people live completely identified with the ego. I am anxious. I am successful. I am wounded. And they suffer because the ego is unstable. It needs constant validation, constant protection, constant feeding. But when you truly ask, who am I? Not out of intellectual curiosity, but as a visceral investigation, you begin to see through the ego. You begin to realize, I am not the thinker. I am that which is aware of thoughts. And that changes everything. Because suddenly the ego's problems are no longer your problems. The ego is anxious. Okay, let it be. The ego is angry. That's fine, it's its job. But you are just observing, in peace. Always in peace. Here is the devastating truth that Ramana tirelessly pointed out. The question, who am I, has no answer in words, because any answer you give is still the ego speaking. I am consciousness. Who is saying this? I am being. Who is stating this? I am the observer. Who observes the observer? Every response creates a new self, a more subtle, more spiritual, more evolved self. But it's still self. It's still separation. It's still illusion. The true answer to the question, who am I, is silence. Not empty silence, but full silence. Conscious silence. The silence that is. Ramana said, the I arises first. Then comes the thought, I am this or I am that. But the pure I before any identification, that is the true you. And when you encounter that pure self, not as a concept but as direct experience, all questions die. Because who would ask? To whom? There was a classic moment. Someone asked Ramana, how do I control my mind? And he replied, show me the mind first. Then you can control it. The person fell silent. Because I couldn't find the mind. There were thoughts. But where was the entity called mind? And Ramana said, if there is no mind separate from you, who will control it, and who needs it? That's the brutal genius of self-investigation. It doesn't solve your problems. It dissolves the you that has problems, and what's left never had any problems at all. Nisargadatta used the same approach. Before asking anything, find out who is asking. But Ramana had refined it to a surgical point. Who am I? 3 words, the simplest question, and the most devastating. Do you really want to do this now? For real? Stop, breathe, and ask yourself, who am I? Don't answer with words, don't seek concepts, just feel. Who is here now? Who is aware of these words? Who is conscious? You won't find an answer. You'll realize that the seeker and the sought are the same, that there was never a separation, that the you who was searching was the very thing being sought, pretending to be lost. And that's not comforting. It's terrifying, because it means that all your spiritual searching was unnecessary, that all your problems were imaginary, that you were always free, but pretended to be imprisoned. In the next chapter, we will understand why Ramana rarely spoke, why he taught through silence, because there are things that language cannot reach, and the truth of who you are is one of them. The question, who am I, is not really a question, it is an arrow pointing inward. Ramana Maharshi. Imagine traveling thousands of kilometers to find an enlightened master. You arrive full of questions, existential doubts, urgent quests, and he looks at you and says nothing. Days go by, weeks. You wait. You wait for some instruction, some technique, some word of wisdom, and he remains silent. This is what happened with Ramana Maharshi. He could go days, weeks, months without speaking a word, and people would sit around him, and something would happen, something that no words could provoke. Because Ramana discovered what few masters know, silence teaches more than any speech. It has a powerful story. A famous poet of the time, very intellectual, very eloquent, traveled to Arunachala to meet Ramana. He had 1,000 philosophical questions prepared. He had studied all the sacred texts. He wanted to debate, question, understand. He arrived. He sat down before Ramana. He opened his mouth to speak, and couldn't. Something in Ramana's gaze paralyzed him. It wasn't intimidation. It was pure presence. It was like looking into conscious emptiness and realizing, there is nothing to ask. There is no one to answer. They remained silent, for hours. When the poet finally stood up to leave, tears streamed down his face, and he said, "My question has been answered, without a word. Because words are limited. Words belong to the mind, and the mind will never understand what lies beyond it. It's like trying to explain the ocean to a fish that has never left the water. Words can only point, but silence is." Ramana wasn't against speaking. When necessary, he spoke, but he knew that most questions didn't need answers. They needed presence. Because the question arose from the mind, and the mind loves complexity, loves problems, loves searching. But when you sit in silence with someone who is completely established in being, something happens. The mind slows down, thoughts lose their power, and suddenly you realize there is something here beyond thoughts, a presence, a consciousness, a living silence. Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching said, "He who knows does not speak, he who speaks does not know." Not because knowledge should be hidden, but because true knowledge cannot be contained in words. It can only be transmitted in silence. Ramana called this silent transmission or Muna Diksha. It wasn't mystical. It was practical. Because when he was silent, he wasn't not speaking. He was being, fully, and that being radiated. And whoever was ready, received it. Think about it. How many words have you heard about peace, about enlightenment, about consciousness? Thousands. And how many have truly transformed you? Few, perhaps none, because words can inspire, but they cannot transform. Transformation happens in silence, when you stop searching for answers outside and finally look inside. Here is the truth that Ramana lived by, and it will change how you view spiritual teachings. Truth cannot be taught. It can only be recognized. And recognition happens in silence, not in the noise of words. When Ramana sat in silence, he wasn't meditating. He wasn't in a trance. He was simply being what he was. And this absolute authenticity, this effortless, unseeking, unneeding being, acted as a mirror. Those who arrived laden with questions would sit down and suddenly realize, the questions are from the mind. But I am not the mind. The questions may continue, but I can be at peace even with them. This didn't happen by magic. It happened because in the presence of conscious silence, the mind loses its tyranny. It continues to function. Thoughts come and go, but you stop believing that thoughts are you. A disciple once asked, "Maharshi, why don't you speak anymore? Why don't you give any more teachings?" And Ramana smiled and said, "I have never stopped teaching. Silence is the highest teaching. Only a few can hear it." And it's true, because in silence, there is no ego to misinterpret. There is no mind to distort. There are no concepts to become a prison. There is only this moment, this presence, this being. Viktor Frankl, who survived concentration camps, wrote something similar. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. Ramana lived in that space, permanently, and in silence, he showed. That space is always here. You just need to stop filling it with noise. There's a Zen saying that perfectly captures Ramana's teaching. The finger points to the moon, but the fool looks at the finger. Ramana would spend hours, days, months pointing. Not with words, with silence, with presence, with being. And most people would look at the finger. But what do I do? What technique? What practice? And he continued pointing, silently, because the moon, the truth, cannot be reached by doing. It can only be seen by ceasing to do. Breathe now. Pause for a second. Feel this silence between the words, this space between the thoughts, this moment where nothing needs to be said, understood, or achieved. This silence is not the absence of sound. It is complete presence. And Ramana lived in it, and he invited everyone to join him. not through rituals or complicated practices, but through the simplest thing. Stop, be, listen to the silence. And in the silence, everything is answered, without a word. In the next chapter, we will understand why so few people actually follow Ramana's direct path. Why, despite being the simplest, it is also the most terrifying. Because there is nowhere to hide. There are no techniques to accumulate. There is no time to postpone. It's just you and the naked question, who am I? Silence is the language of God. Everything else is a poor translation. Rumi. No rituals, no mantras, no years of practice, no guru to blindly follow. No promise of enlightenment in the future, only you. And the question, who am I? Sounds simple, right? It even sounds too easy. And that's exactly why most people run away. Because Ramana Maharshi's direct path gives you nowhere to hide. It gives you no excuses. It gives you no time to prepare. It's now. It's direct. And that terrifies the ego in a way that no gradual path can. Think of how many spiritual paths there are. Yoga with its postures and pranayamas. Buddhism with its meditations and precepts. Tantra with its elaborate rituals. Each offering something to do, something to accumulate, something to achieve. And the ego loves that, because it provides purpose. I'm on the right track. I'm making progress. I'll get there, eventually. But Ramana would tear all that down. You want to do something? Great. Find out who wants to do it. You want to progress? Wonderful. Find out who is progressing. You want to get there? Perfect. Find out who is here. And suddenly, there's nothing left. No practices to be proud of, no progress to measure, no future to fantasize about. A disciple once came to Ramana and said, Maharshi, I have meditated for 20 years. I have done retreats. I have studied scriptures. But I have not yet awakened. What more do I need to do? Ramana looked at him and asked, who hasn't awakened? The man was speechless, because for the first time in 20 years he realized he had transformed awakening into just another ego project, another conquest, another thing for him to achieve. But that him was precisely the problem. The direct path is terrifying because it doesn't give you enough rope to hang yourself. Other paths say, practice this for 10 years, then that for 5 years, and maybe then you'll be ready. And the ego breathes a sigh of relief. Ah, so I'm 15 years old. I can postpone it. I can continue being me a little longer. But Ramana, who am I? Now, not tomorrow, not after more practice, now. And this exposes the brutal truth. You don't need to prepare. You don't need to evolve. You don't need to become worthy, because you already are. And if you already are, then the whole search was a lie. All the effort was evasion. All the one day I'll get there was the ego postponing the inevitable. Kierkegaard put it another way. The door to happiness opens inward. You have to step back to open it. Most people are pushing, accumulating practices, techniques, knowledge, pushing, and the door doesn't open because you're in the way. The direct path is to retreat, to stop, to cease doing, and that's terrifying because the ego only knows how to do. If I stop doing, I cease to exist. And it's right. If you truly stop, the ego stops. And the terror is, if the ego stops, I stop. But Ramana whispered, try, stop, and see if you stop too. And when you truly stop, when you give up the search, the practices, the efforts, you discover something shocking. You don't stop. You never stopped. The doing stopped. But you continue, more real than ever. Here's why the direct route is more terrifying than any other. He doesn't give you time. He doesn't give you excuses. He doesn't give you a place to hide. He throws you straight into the abyss and says, jump, or admit you're afraid. Other paths are like stairs. You climb step by step. You feel progress. You feel accomplishment. And if you get scared, you can stop on a step and say, I need more preparation. But Ramana's direct path is like jumping off a cliff. There are no steps. There is no middle ground. It's all or nothing. It's you recognizing now that you never needed the ladder, or spending your life building ladders that lead nowhere. And most people choose the stairs, because it gives the illusion of control. It gives the feeling that I'm doing something, and the ego can sleep soundly. Yes, I'm searching, but I haven't found it yet. I need more time. Ramana was brutal about this. When someone asked for a practice, he would give them, ask, who am I, constantly, until the question dissolves and only the questioner remains. And how long does that take? It takes no time at all, because you already are. The question only removes what you are not. But I need discipline, I need routine, I need years of practice. Who needs it? And then came the silence. Because the person saw the self that asks for more time, more practice, more preparation, is precisely the illusory self that needs to be seen through. Nisargadatta used to say the same thing. You don't need time to be yourself. You need time to be something else. But to be yourself, that's instantaneous. The direct path doesn't let you pretend. It doesn't let you procrastinate. It doesn't let you turn spirituality into just another ego-driven self-improvement project. And that's why most people run away. There's a Zen story that perfectly captures this. A master was sitting on the edge of a precipice. A student approached and asked, which way is it? The master pointed to the precipice and said, jump. The student froze. But what if I die? And the master smiled. You will go. That's the idea. Ramana's direct path is the precipice, and most people stay on the edge their whole lives, watching, considering. Maybe one day I'll jump, when I'm more prepared, when I'm stronger, when I'm more evolved. But Ramana had already jumped, at 16 years old, without warning his ego, without asking permission. And on the other side, he discovered that there was never a precipice. There was never death. There was never danger. It was all an illusion. And on the other side of the illusion, there he was. He always had been. Breathe. Feel that fear now. That fear of stopping the search, of stopping the doing, of simply being. This fear is real, but it's not yours. It belongs to the ego, and the ego has every right to be afraid, because on the direct path, it dies. But you finally live. In the final chapter, we'll reach our ultimate destination, self-realization. Not as a concept, not as a future goal, but as a present-day recognition that you've never been anything else. Get ready, because the end of the journey is the beginning of everything. The path to truth is so narrow that you cannot walk on it. You must disappear into it. Ramana Maharshi, self-realization. The word sounds grand, mystical, as if it were the pinnacle of spiritual evolution, as if it were something you will achieve after decades of effort. But Ramana Maharshi completely shattered that illusion. Self-realization isn't about becoming something greater. It's about realizing you were never the small you thought you were. It's not about gaining anything. It's about losing everything, all illusions, all identities, all stories. And what remains? It's not an enlightened person. It's the end of the person and the beginning of the real. Ramana used to say something that confused people. There is no self-realization, because there is no you separate from the real to accomplish anything. Think about it. If you already are the real, if you have always been pure consciousness, formless, limitless, then what is there to realize? It's like a wave trying to realize that it is the ocean. But the wave has always been the ocean. It never ceased to be. It just forgot. Self-realization in Ramana's teachings is not a future event. It is a present recognition. It is when you stop pretending to be the wave and realize, I am the ocean. I always have been. The wave form was temporary, but my essence is infinite. And this recognition doesn't come through effort. It comes through letting go of the effort. It doesn't come through searching. It comes through stopping the searching. Because here's the secret. You can't achieve what you already are. You can only stop pretending to be something else. There was a devastating moment in Ramana's life. A close disciple, who had spent years by his side, came to him in despair. "Maharshi, I have practiced self-inquiry faithfully. I ask, who am I? 1,000 times a day. But I still haven't realized it. I haven't awakened yet. What am I doing wrong?" And Ramana looked at him with infinite compassion and said, "The problem is that you are trying to realize." "Who is trying?" "That someone who wants to realize is precisely the illusion that needs to be seen." The disciple began to cry, because he realized he had transformed even self-realization into just another project of the ego. "I will realize myself. I will awaken." But this I was the obstacle. And Ramana continued, "Self-realization is not about gaining something. It's about losing the illusion that there is a separate you. It's like waking up from a dream. In the dream, you were a character. You had problems, fears, pursuits. But when you wake up, you realize, I was never that character. I was the dreamer. I always have been." This is the brutal truth of self-realization on Ramana's path. It is not evolution. It is dissolution. It is not building a greater self. It is seeing through the self completely. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. But Ramana went further. Become nothing, and you will be everything. Because as long as you believe you are someone, even if that someone is spiritual, evolved, and conscious, there is still separation. There is still I and other. There is still illusion. But in true self-realization, there's no one left to be realized. There's only being, pure, absolute, formless. Here is the ultimate truth that Ramana lived and taught every second of his existence. Self-realization isn't about achieving something. It's about stopping hiding from yourself. You are not seeking God, consciousness, truth, enlightenment. You are that. You always have been. What you are seeking is seeking through you. You are the seeker and the sought, the observer and the observed, the questioner and the answer. Ramana, in that near-death experience at age 16, didn't achieve anything. He stopped. He stopped pretending to be Ramana, the boy. And what remained was what had always been there, pure, timeless, limitless consciousness. And this is available now. Not after years of practice, not after further evolution. Now. Because you don't need to become conscious. You already are consciousness. What you need is to stop identifying with everything that is temporary, thoughts, emotions, body, history, and recognize, I am that which is aware of all of this. And when you recognize, not intellectually, but viscerally, everything changes. Or rather, nothing changes. But you stop suffering from the change, because you realize, I am not what changes. I am the space where change happens. Does the body age? Let it age. I am not the body. Does the mind become restless? Let it become restless. I am not the mind. Does life bring pain? Let it bring it. I am that which is aware of the pain, not the pain itself. This is not indifference. It is freedom. Freedom to live fully without being imprisoned by anything. Ramana lived this until his last breath. When he was dying of cancer in intense pain, someone lamented, Maharshi, you are suffering so much. And he smiled and said, They say I'm dying. But where is death? I was never born. The self-realization that Ramana pointed to is not for the strong. It is not for the courageous. It is not for the special. It's for anyone who's tired of lying, tired of pretending, tired of carrying a false identity. And when you finally get tired, when you can no longer bear to sustain the character, defend the story, prove its worth, something opens up. Not a door to the future, but the recognition of what has always been here. Breathe now. Feel. Who is breathing? Who is feeling? Before you name it, before you think, before you create a story, who is here? This. This is you, nameless, formless, limitless, pure consciousness, pure being, pure freedom. And you never lost that. You only pretended you lost it, to have something to strive for, to have a journey, to have a purpose. But now you can stop. Stop chasing what you never lost. Stop becoming what you always were. Stop running, and finally rest within yourself. This is self-realization. Not grandiose, not mystical, just real, simple, obvious. You were always free. You just needed to stop believing you were trapped. If you've made it this far, maybe you're ready to stop, to acknowledge, to be. And when you stop, you realize the journey never existed. You were always at home. Self-realization is simply being yourself, not knowing or becoming something. Ramana Maharshi.